Hello and welcome to the season's premiere of the Dadas show, coming to you straight from the Boma Hotel. I'm your host, Ashiko Mbune. Karibuni sana. The Dadas show is a highly interactive show. The themes and the topics that we will be discussing this season are based off the recently held content creating workshop. Now, this workshop brought together a group of women from different walks of life and from different ages, with the aim of finding out what are the women's issues, especially during the incoming general elections. This is a collaboration between Journalists for Human Rights, JHR, and KBC, Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. Have a look.
Hivi sasa anayezungumza nanyi ni rais wa taifa. Did you watch that? Who was that? Yes, she had to remind people that she is not just the Suluhu you see or the woman you see, but she had kind of like, you know, the opportunity that came and she grabbed it. You are not only listening to, you are listening. Hivi sasa anayewa ni raisi wa inchi. So I think even as like what she said, women, we should also try to like hit hard what you are first so that people kind of like resonate with you. She's not just a woman, she's something else.
But when you're speaking about men, you're talking of engineers. He's an engineer, he's a doctor. But when you are making reference to a woman doctor, you emphasize on the woman and not the doctor. So I think one of the things in trying to also push media, let's also profile women with their profession, and then bring my motherhood, my womanhood after you profile my profession.
If you're discussing FGM in Nairobi, it's different on what is happening in Kisii and what is happening in Northeastern. So it is important to bring different contexts so that people can understand the vast of the issue that we're speaking about.
Personally, I've tried to get media come cover what the community has to say about the issues at the national level, you know, especially when taxes are high, when a certain decision has to be made and all that. When we demonstrate, they will come when we've been tear gassed, not when we want to pass the message.
Security of women journalists, especially in reporting political news, because politics in reality is so crazy. In reality, it's so crazy. So I'm imagining with these gadgets, how do you protect, how do you look at the security and safety of these journalists who have to chase after people in a chaotic area? They have to cover those stories.
She bet even with her office job, with her car, you know, she also worries about that in a different form in the office, right? Where people now expect her to provide sexual favors for her to be able to rise up the ladder of her workplace.
In terms of her rights in acquisition of property, what are the legal loopholes she has to take care of? Because now that she's working, she may be acquiring property. Can she own property alone, or does that have to involve the man? What are the legal rights that are pertaining to her owning separate properties from the man?
Welcome back. On this two-part series, we shall take a hard look on gender-based violence with a serious and special attention to domestic violence. According to the Kenya Data Bureau of Statistics, an estimated 40% of women between the ages of 15 and 49 experience gender-based violence in the course of their lifetime. And another 1 out of 4 women have experienced domestic violence within the past 12 months. These statistics are completely alarming. This is why women-led organizations such as FIDA have appealed to the president to deem gender-based violence a national disaster. In this episode, we will take a closer look at domestic violence and seek to ask, why are the rates increasing and what do we need to do to address this matter? So joining me is an excellent panel of beautiful ladies who are championing the fight against domestic violence in their respective fields. To my left is Honorable Waithera Shege. She's a member of County Assembly South B Ward who has been a great ally in the fight against domestic violence. She will tell us more about that in the course of the show. Next to her does not need any introduction. Her name is Jerry Megwe, who is the founder and director of Usikimie, an organization working towards ending the prevalence of sexual and gender-based violence. Next to Jerry is Shitagwa Mwavishi. Have I gotten the name correctly? Shitagwa Mwavishi, who is from the International Federation of Women Lawyers. Of course, we know that they have been championing for the passing of policies and bills, especially in regards to matters gender-based violence and domestic violence. And finally, we have Kate Kamau, a survivor of domestic violence who, against all odds, has turned lemons into lemonade and is now spearheading the campaign against domestic violence, just like the ladies coming up.
The number of rescue shelters for gender-based violence cases is on the rise in the country following increased cases of violence reported since 2020. Only a small number of victims make it to these shelters or are rescued from abusive homes. However, many of the victims fail to report due to fear of more violence from their partners. The GBV victims say they endure the violence because they have nowhere to go. Feminists for Peace, Rights and Justice Center is the home for victims of gender-based violence in Kibra, founded by editor Ochieng. Popularly known as Nyar Masai, Irene Atieno has endured violence in marriage for 15 years.
Kwa majina naitwa Irene Atieno Dweso. Mimi ni mkaaji wa Kibra hapa. Niliolewa mapema nikiwa mdogo, msichana mdogo. Bwana ananipiga, ananiambia mimi ni msichana mdogo, hataki kunioa, niende kwetu. Sasa nashindwa nikienda kwetu pale, na baba yangu pia alisema ati akipata msichana yoyote ameshika mimba kwake anamkatakata na panga. Na je, mimi nitakuaje? Sasa nikajaribu kuvumilia kwa ndoa hapa, nikajaribu kuvumilia kwa ndoa, nikazaa.
Getting married at a young age of 16 years old, the relationship was emotional abuse before escalating to physical abuse.
Kushika mimba ya pili, violence ikaanza ndani ya nyumba. Kanibidi nikaenda kwa chief huko Ng'ando. Kwenda kwa chief huko Ng'ando, nikaambia chief, kujeni mnisaidie. Chief akakuja na watu wake, wakampata ndani ya nyumba kama amelewa hapo hivyo. Wakamtoa. Kumtoa wakampeleka mpaka kwa chief.
Despite numerous reports to the area chief, her husband did not change. Nyar Masai is lucky to have survived the abuse after things got worse when she had a child with cleft lip. The abuse was extended to children.
Saa zingine hata nikikimbizwa nje, anafukuza watoto, endeni kwa baba zenyu. Baba zenyu wapi? Watoto wanalia wanasema, "Wewe daddy. Wewe ndio daddy wetu. Wewe ndio daddy." Mimi si baba yenu. Endeni pale mnaenda. Sasa ilikuwa inabidi kila watoto nilikuwa na wasupply kwa manyumba. Wewe lala hapa, wewe lala hapa, wewe lala hapa. Mimi naweza hata kulala huko nje. Nikashika tena mimba ya mwisho, sasa mtoto wa 6. Na sasa ni marehemu. Huyo mtoto alirudi akakufa. Sasa unajua watoto wote niliwazaa na violence. Hakuna hata ile raha nimeona kwa watoto. Nikamzika, kumzika, baadaye pia yeye akarudi akakufa. Kukufa nikaenda ushago nikamzika. Kwenda kumzika nikamaliza 1 year, nikarudi huku Nairobi.
After the death of her husband, Nyar Masai moved to Kibra where she met editor.
Sasa bila aliaga hivyo, nikasema wacha nikuje huku Kibra. Sasa unajua kwa nyumba hapa mimi nakaa hapa, sina kitu ya kukula, sina nini. Sasa siku moja mama mwingine akaniambia, nataka nikusaidie. Mimi sina pesa ya kukusaidia, lakini nataka kukutuma kwa mama mwingine. Kama nikamuuliza mama mgani? Akaniambia anaitwa editor. Nikakuja kwa editor, nikamuuliza editor, nataka unisaidie. Akaniambia nataka kukusaidia. Juu vile nakuona hivi, hata unaweza enda hata ujinyonge. Juu naona uko na hasira na naona roho yako ikiwa mbali, nataka kukusaidia. Akaniambia Masai, nataka tuanzishe, yani niko na organization, lakini sasa nataka kukuweka hapo ndani. Sasa nikakaa chini, akaanza kunitrain na mambo ya hii organization mpaka ikafika wakati nimekomaa hivi. Watoto pia wanaafektiwa na mambo ya gender based violence. Juu hata watoto wangu wakati nilikuwa napigwa walikuwa nalia. Wakati napigwa wanakuja wanajifunika kwangu wakiambia dadi wacha kupiga mama, dadi wacha kupiga mama. Sasa ni ile kitu ina affect watoto kwa manyumba na hata nje. Ile mawaidha niza ambia wanawake kama mimi wale wanapitia GBV, wakiona kama imeshindikana wanaweza rudi kwa ushago ama hata wakae na mama zao, kwa sababu one time mwanaume atanaweza kukua. Juu unajua leo mwanaume akikushikia kisu, kesho atakushikia panga.
Meet 33-year-old Eunice Ojambo, a survivor of gender-based violence. Eunice attempted suicide to escape from her daily problems.
Kwa majina naitwa Eunice Ojambo Muyungi. Mimi ni mkazi wa Kibera, Sarang'ombe, Katwekera. Niko na miaka 33 years na niko na watoto 4. Niliolewa bado niko msichana mdogo. Bado nilikuwa shule because the man pregnanted me when I'm in school. So it forced me kuishi na yeye kwa sababu sikuwa na any otherwise.
The mother of 4 had her first child at the age of 19 years old.
At first tulikuwa tunaishi maisha tu ilikuwa mbaya sana, nile life ilikuwa ya kungangana cause at that time hakuwa na kazi vizuri. So alikuwa tu na hustle. Pia mimi nilikuwa tu najaribu na hustle kidogo yenye tumepata tunaleta pamoja kama bibi na bwana na tunashare our ideas.
Their marriage changed and became violent after pressure from her husband's family for having 3 girls.
The mama alikuwa na demand lazima the husband akwenda second wife because I was just giving birth to baby girls. Venye nilimuuliza akaanza kufight akachukua kisu akanidunga nayo. Venye aliona nina bleed sana akatoroka akanyacha kwa nyumba. Venye masista zangu alikuja yeye alitoroka akaenda.
Sadly, Eunice did not leave the marriage for fear of starting a new relationship and stigma.
Ile life yenye umetoka ina marriage umerudi pale niliona ni difficult na uko na watoto pia niliona ni difficult na bado pia nilikuwa mdogo. There's another day tulipigana mpaka akachukua chakula yenye nilikuwa nimepika kanimwagia mbele ya watoto. My first born akatoroka akaenda my brother akamchukua. Our first born akamchukua, alikuwa naishi naye akamamtafutie shule wakae naye cause pia walikuwa napitia hiyo stress, watoto wako mentally tortured kabisa. Baba akikuja kwa nyumba yani wanaona tu ni kama kuna tu mtu mfulani ameingia, pia wanafia kabisa. Hata kama anaingia kama walikuwa na watch ama walikuwa anafanya kitu, kila mtu atawacha. Yani watu pia walikuwa wanashtuka tu kabisa wakimuona. Ukijua unapita violent marriage tunaweza kukusaidia, open up. Unajua the more una silent your voice nobody can reach you, but the more una open up your voice there's somebody somewhere who can reach you.
Rescue shelters for survivors offer healing for both mothers and children, gender-based violence survivors.
To get the ball rolling, we'll move on to Madam Jerry. You run an organization that gives shelter to GBV. This gives you first-hand experience on the impact of domestic violence in society and people's lives on a day-to-day basis. What is the situation of domestic violence in the country?
Domestic violence, of course, escalates to children, so we handle a lot of child abuse. Yeah, and then primarily, so domestic violence, child abuse, threats, blackmail, all these kind of issues. Yeah.
Ms. Mwavishi, how would you define domestic violence according to the law?
Thank you. Yes, there has been a lot of debate in terms of what quantifies or what qualifies domestic violence, but we currently have a law that is in place, the Protection Against Domestic Violence, which was enacted in the year 2015, which has extensively and expansively defined what domestic violence is And recently, we also had a case that was decided by Justice Aburili that also tried to expand the definition of domestic violence. But what we have in our law, that is the Protection Against Domestic Violence, it defines domestic violence to include physical, economic, sexual, psychological, emotional. So it covers basically what you might not consider to be domestic violence, but it has provided, in terms of abuse, there's economic abuse. It has defined what economic abuse is. In terms of physical and emotional, it has also defined what physical and emotional is.
So according to a report by Human Rights Watch that claims that the Kenya government has failed to prevent gender-based violence or ensure access to services for survivors, perhaps, Mheshimiwa, would you like to shine some light on that? What is the role of the government in the fight against domestic violence?
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of the panel today. First of all, I must say that gender-based violence is a dark, silent shadow that is hovering around many homes and in people's minds too. One of the denominators that I must agree with my colleagues is that gender-based violence is a development agenda that's bringing our GDP down. When you look at where we have come from, I'm elected in an area that is 85% occupied by an informal settlement. And within this informal settlement, many cases of gender-based violence are coming from the female gender. Because if you ask me from where I sit, because I'm not here to protect the government, my work is representation, oversight, and to make laws. So where the government has failed, I'll always say that they have failed. The government before 2017, before I came into office, if you ask me, did not do much on the issues of gender-based violence. However, when we came on board after 2017, there are several laws and policies that we have brought on board. I brought the motion on the equipping, managing, and financing 17 gender desks in Nairobi, because Nairobi have 17 sub-counties. And therefore, one of the major strides that we have made within the legal framework for Nairobi County is to make sure that those gender desks are not only gender desks that are based at the police stations, but they're also gender-based desks that are fully financed. When you look at our budget-making process, we always say that let us have public participation from Nairobi residents. And that is where it should start, with the issue of annual development plan. The annual development plan for Nairobi, if you look at the public participation that has been done between 2017 and 2021 to date, they have not represented their people very well, because that is where it must start. One of the reasons why we have not had money to implement some of these things is because the residents of Nairobi don't understand that process, budget-making process, which is very key. If any of you bring 20 issues and 20 agendas on the table and they do not have the budget, they will never be implemented. So that's one of the achievements that we have had within Nairobi County. You've also seen that we have the SGBV law. It has been an act. Now it has been assented to, so therefore it's a law now. And we are able now to act on it. The only thing that's pending is making sure that we create awareness within the residents of Nairobi so that they can understand what does that law entail. Because if you ask people today if they know the contents of that law, they don't know. So those are some of the challenges that we are having within Nairobi, but we are not going to give up. We are doing a lot, and we are calling the other stakeholders to come on board and to help us. We now have the NMS and the county government, and I'm also in the assembly. I will work on the budget making process, but then we also need other multi-agency teams to come on board. Yes.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa. So FIDA made a call on government, as we mentioned when we start, particularly the president, to declare gender-based violence as a national disaster. For the people who are watching at home and do not completely grasp the intensity of this matter, why would you say that GBV qualifies as a national disaster?
for quite some time, GBV, SGBV, we are heading towards a direction of it being normalized. You beat someone on the street, it's okay. They go to court, they are released, nothing is done. You go to report, you're told, go back to your husband. You go back home, you're told, this is the way to sustain your marriage. So the objective of us calling out for it to be declared as a national disaster is because we are heading that direction that it will not be taken serious. And one, we want people to come out and speak out so that accountability and action can be taken upon this kind of violence, because it's not a joke. It's a serious matter that every day we hear a young woman, an old lady, a child has been abused, violence has been inflicted on them. So it's a matter of bringing everyone on board to take action and to treat this violence with the dignity it deserves, because we are all bound to be protected by this government. The Constitution has provided protection for each and every person. So for it to be declared national disaster, it will prompt people to act, to take action, this violence to be treated with the seriousness it deserves. And first of all, and most important, it will encourage victims to speak out, because that's the challenge. Because you see, most of the data that people have is for the reported cases. What about the unreported ones? Most of them, they don't report because they're out of fear, shame. Maybe they're being told you're not going to get help. They're seeing things are not being taken seriously. So for it to be declared national disaster, it will actually prompt accountability and action to be taken. Yeah, thank you.
Still on you, Mwavishi, in your opinion, do you feel like the government has responded to this call? Do you feel like the government prioritizes matters SGBV?
For start, we can see the government is trying. They have not yet got there. We still need them to act more. Recently, yes, they launched an SGBV court at Shanzu, that is in Mombasa. That's a good progress, because you see, we're trying to send a message that these cases are not as usual as the normal cases, such as murder, such as theft and all that. We need specialized courts to handle this matter with the privacy that they deserve. So we think that, yes, the government is really trying, but they're not yet there. But the steps that they're really taking in terms of coming up with policies to enable people on the ground to act on them, they're trying, but they're not yet there. Yes.
So we can also commend them on the steps that they have taken so far and encourage them to keep pushing.
Yes.
Because it's an issue that needs an immediate and a rapid response, yes?
Yes.
So, Ms. Migwe, running an organization such as yours, I'm sure, is not an easy feat. And I'm in complete awe of you. Share with us, what was the inspiration behind Usikimie? And I'm curious, what does your day-to-day look like?
The inspiration behind Usikimie was simply, there's a lot of violence online as well, especially violence aimed at women. This specific violence looks like online bullying, minimization of anything. Whenever you talk about domestic violence, or you talk about other issues of sexual violence, you will find people minimizing it, making it a joke. It becomes a fodder for memes even, you know. And it was very offensive when, in 2019, when Ivy Wangeshi, may she rest in peace, was killed. And what happened, instead of empathy and compassion, was a lot of jokes around this. And it was very offensive. Like, someone is dead, someone killed, a woman was murdered. And when she was murdered, instead of there being compassion, what followed was a lot of jokes, kata shoka, amekula fair, and such things, which is actual dehumanization of women. And normalization of it's okay to be violent against women if they eat fair, and such things. So Usikimie started as do not be silent about such things. And that is how we started, as an action to just start, provide a platform where people could actually speak up. And it grew to become the organization that it is today. My day-to-day depends. I wake up in the morning, I look at my emails, by the time I'm even looking at my emails, a lot of calls have come. We do have a call center now, and we have a toll-free line. And some of these things are escalated so that I can know which kind of action, because they come from all over the country. They're not just domiciled within Nairobi. And so from there, now we can decide how to plan our day. We do run a feeding program in Soweto, which is very important because most of our calls a while back were coming from Soweto. And so we felt, how do we then impact? Because there is an intersection between SGBV and hunger. So children were being lured simply by food. And so we felt for us, or mothers were sending their kids out to go and solicit for money. How do these children solicit for money if not through sex? So if these children can be fed, then we can actually lower the rates. So we do have a feeding program. So I try as much as possible to be there. We do also run empowerment programs for women, so which we talk to women. So in between going to the police and hospital, I also try as much as possible to be there for the organization.
It really does take a strong woman. And by strong, I do not mean physical strength. I mean strong in personality, strong in faith, strong in integrity, and a very decent human being. We are in awe of you, Jerry, and we wish you nothing but the best moving forward. Yeah. Now, Ms. Kamau, I thank you so much for making time to sit on this panel. I want to commend you on your bravery, and I'm sure it's not been in vain. Kindly share with us your story.
Thank you, Ashiko, for the wonderful opportunity. I must say it hasn't been easy because first and foremost, when it comes to domestic violence, it's the norm. As per when you're married and your husband starts beating you, then you go to your mom. Then your mom tells you, this is not right, you're supposed to go back. You understand the fact that I've been with your father for so long, so why are you running away? So it becomes kind of like you become embarrassed talking about it. So in my case, mine started immediately after I gave birth to my daughter, which was in 2013, because I came with my son. I had a son. So when we were still courting and dating, he was very good with my son, very good. Then immediately after our daughter got born, then things started changing. He started showing his true colors. He used to come home at night after he's gone for his rampage. He normally used to work at night as a taxi driver, and he used to have a shisha shop. So after his business, he's drunk, he's intoxicated because he takes miraa and shisha. He'll come and wake me up, I make him food, then he'll wake my son up, then he'll chase us out of the house. So it even came to a point my son was like, Mom, leo tutalala nje ka gari. Because he was used to the fact that Dada atakuja atupige alafu tulale nje ka gari. So it was really hurting and very disappointing. Actually got postpartum depression. Then it reached a point my son didn't like the sister because Daddy anapenda nani kunishinda, and for me it wasn't really a conducive environment. I left the first time, then he looked for me again and told me he'll change. I went back, he changed for kind of like 2-3 weeks. Then I left the second time, then he came again, he changed for like a month. Then you see when it came to the third time now, he hit me in front of my son and my daughter and broke my nose. And my blood sort of like was spattering on my daughter because my daughter was holding me on my legs because she was tiny. Then she was crying and she was really screaming. And I think it just hit me and I was like, you know what, I can't do this again. So I became very bitter and very annoyed. Then I asked myself, if my daughter were to come and tell me she's being beaten by someone, what would I do if I was in her place? So I just spoke to my mom. And my mom asked me, do you want to leave? Are you sure you're going to stay away? Because we've done this. We've gone through this process. We've helped you out. Then you've gone back. Are you sure? Then I was like, yeah. Then my mom sent me money. Then I moved. We had to play around with his movements so that I can move without him knowing I'm moving. So I planned like a week, 2 days ahead. I looked for a house, I cleaned the house, then I started packing my stuff in a way that he can't notice there's something which is going around. Then on that particular day, which is on a Friday, because I remember it was on a Friday because he's a Kikuyu, but he's a Muslim. So he was going to the mosque. So we weren't actually talking. We used to pass each other in the house, like the way a motorcycle and a car passes each other. We weren't conversant in the house. So that particular day, he just gave the house help 1,000 shillings, told her to buy some stuff. Then we were like doing thorough cleaning. To him, by the way, he never used to like people sleeping. You have to work. He's the only person who's allowed to sleep, even watch TV. That's the kind of life we used to live. The life that you have to, when you hear the keys to that, you're like, did I do, I'd been told to, you know, you're trying to go back and think if there's something you've done. He had said you do that and you haven't done. That's a problem. He was mediocre and he was very petty, because he used to even come to the house and look at the sufurias and say they have not yet been washed nicely. He'll pass his fingers through, you know. He's the kind of man who'd look for a small problem and create it into a big issue. So that particular Friday we were doing thorough cleaning, because Fridays for thorough cleaning. Change carpets, curtains, you change the bed sheets, you wash the duvets, and what. That is how I managed to pack my stuff without him knowing, because now I set up his stuff. I put his curtains, I put his carpet, I packed my stuff. So he carried out 2 bags and he left. I didn't know where he was going. He never used to tell me, because normally he used to leave on Friday, come on Monday. So those 3 days at least we were okay. So that particular day he left with 2 bags. Then I was like, I called the guy, the transport guy, and told him, please come as quickly as possible, because this guy has gone to the mosque. I'm not so sure what time he'll come back. We packed and we finished packing. Then as we were leaving, the watchman told me, by the way, Baba Nani amerudi. So we sort of like, in a split second, we actually passed each other, because it's a gated community, so you have 2 entrances. At a roundabout, you can enter the estate. So he came through this side as we left through this side. So it was a split second. We just missed each other. So that's when he called me when he reached the house. Then he was like, you've moved? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, okay, najota rudi. So it's been 8 years, because my daughter is 10 now. Yeah.
Congratulations,
Thank
Kate.
you.
I mean, that is truly inspirational to actually be able to move and gather yourself, you know, and dismiss the naysayers. It's complete bravery. If there's a lady at home right now watching who is in a similar situation, you being there, where you've gone, you've come back, you've gone, you've come back, what would you tell them?
Honestly, it's a really tough decision, because most people right now remain in abusive relationships because of the children. But you also need to understand psychologically, a kid needs to have a safe space, and a kid needs a peace of mind. Babies actually children are sponges. They really grasp so much, and the trauma we as parents go through, it also affects them psychologically. That's why, as Njeri said, people become bullies, or you get bullied at school, because you're seeing your mom or your dad being beaten, then you're like, mami si ameka. So in real sense, when it comes to children, I stayed because of my daughter, because I was like, my kids need a father figure. But then I sat and asked myself, what if I were to die? Who will take care of my kids? Because your children are your responsibility. When it comes to the man who's hitting even your kid, yeah? Like right now as we speak, my son is turning 17. My son told me, Mom, I will look for that man when I finish school, so that he beats me the way he used to beat you. And you can understand that is a period of 8 years, but he still has it in his mind, and it's so fresh. You see, kids don't need an environment whereby they can get scared. That's where you get kids they have bedwetting issues, because they are afraid of waking up. She or he might wake up, aitane, daddy akasirike, akupige. So me personally, if anybody is in that situation, I would advise you to just think about yourself. and think about your children, because your children need you. As much as you're getting stigmatized out there, even if your parents were to refuse you, just think about yourself, because at the end of the day, peace of mind and self-love is the most important thing. Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much, Kate. Before we take a small break, Heshimiwa, you are you're running for another term in the upcoming general elections. Being a representative, and now we consider you an ally of the Dadas show, what would you like to see in the incoming government?
I want to see a government that has officers who understand these gender issues, who understand that a victim must first be looked from a different eye from that of a perpetrator. And I also explained to you that my area is largely occupied by an informal settlement. That doesn't mean that the estates, we don't have the GBV cases. We do have, but the highest numbers, the statistics are very clear. Even when you started here, we said 40% of Kenyans below the age of 18 have experienced one form of GBV at a particular time and date. You can imagine those are very high numbers. And one last thing, we are in an electioneering period. If you look at the data between 2016 and 2017, the statistics for 2016 were 1,997. When we moved to 2017, when elections were ongoing, we now got 2,021. What does that tell you? That we have to be very careful. We have to put our antennae up during this electioneering period. I personally evidenced at Nairobi Women's Hospital, together with the GVRC, when a one-day-old kid was raped inside Kibera slums. One-day-old baby. If you go to Nairobi Women's Hospital, they have the data with them. Can you imagine a human being raping a one-day-old baby? You can imagine. That is inhuman. And therefore, moving forward, I would want to see a government that really looks after the issues not only of women, even men are going through GBV, and the numbers are also worrying moving forward. So we do not want to also discriminate between men and women. We want to have equality within our society, and the government must lead by example. And we are also leading from where I sit in terms of lawmaking and policies. We have already done that. Let the government now go ahead and implement some of these laws that we have brought on board. Thank you.
Concerning the subject of gender-based violence, I think it's bad to start with. People should not be beating each other and butchering each other at this age and time. At least disagreements must be solved amicably. If I believe there is nothing that cannot be solved. However serious it is, a solution can always be found. So it's criminal to beat someone. I mean, you find situations where somebody has beaten another, they have deformed them. So at the end of the day, it doesn't help, because if it was an issue that could have been, and if it came to a point where you don't agree at all, I think it is better for people to go their separate ways than killing each other in a cruel arrangement. Because when it gets to that point, it's now cruel. It's no longer friendly, it's no longer a marriage, it's not a relationship, that is something different. So you just better part ways. So I advocate for peaceful resolution of disputes and family problems and domestic issues. People should talk, just talk. And if somebody is going through violence, speak up.
Naonelea maono ya gender-based violence si vizuri kwa wanaume wenye wanatesa mabibi zao, na kwa sababu inaletanga madhara kwa manyumba sana, kama vile inaweza leta divorce, watoto wanaweza kuhangaika kwa manyumba, wanaweza kosa masomo. So kwa maoni yangu, serikali inafaa kuchukulia hatua wanaume, sababu wanawake wako na haki ya kuwa katika ndoa.
We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back. At this point, I would like to offer my wonderful audience an opportunity to ask a question, make a comment, or give us any form of feedback.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nyoka Bengare. I am a lawyer and I'm from African Women Global Network. Now, my question goes to Mwanishi. As much as we're trying to fight domestic violence, I know that there are so many cases that lawyers normally have. So my question is, how do you deal with cases whereby the victim decides to forgive the perpetrators? So are you able to, basically how are you able to bring the perpetrator to justice if the victim has already forgiven them?
What normally happens when a client comes at FIDA, we normally do a multifaceted approach in terms of handling a client, because yes, sometimes clients withdraw when the perpetrator either apologize or they feel that the case is taking too long. So what we normally do is, you cannot advise you against not withdrawing, because at the end of the day, it's your choice. And if you don't want the matter to proceed, we'll take up the second part, which is offering psychosocial support to see whether you're healing. Because as much as you want to get justice through the law process, if you don't want to continue, because sometimes the Kenyan justice takes too long, so victims tend to feel like it's taking too long, I don't feel like I'm getting justice. So how do you handle such a person? Of course, they'll relapse, which we do not expect, but we take it in a way that, yes, this is the path that you can go through in terms of justice, the court process and all that, but there's a second part in terms of psychosocial support to at least get you there, that once you feel like this one is taking too long in terms of healing, you're also getting some kind of feedback out of it. So that's how now we normally approach it, because sometimes, yes, victims do tend to withdraw on one of other reasons. Either the family is pushing you to withdraw, you're seeing the system is not working, you're frustrated, the person has apologized, and so we do not pressure you to continue if you don't want, but then again, we try to look at your health-wise, mental health after that. Thank you.
My name is Jane Kuria from Simama na Dada initiative, and my question goes to Kate. As a mama, and you've once been a wife to somebody, how did you deal with your emotional healing journey? And my point of concern will be on your kids. How have you helped them to heal through those years? Because myself, I come from a society whereby people have experienced beatings, they have been chased away, and growing up seeing all that, one way or the other, I hated seeing men in my life. And to mark these, I also found myself in the engineering and construction field, which is men-based. And so I find at work, even maybe if somebody does something small to me and he is a man, it irritates me. So how have you helped your kids to grow through that emotional damage journey?
Thank you for your question. Firstly, it was a process, because as you've heard, I told you my son was the one who underwent so much of the trauma as compared to my daughter. Because when it comes to boys are very protective of their moms. So for him to understand that whatever mom was going through was hurting her, I had to sit down immediately after I left. Before I left, actually, I sat down with them and I spoke to them and I told them, I know you guys have seen whatever I'm going through, and I'm sorry I left you in such a position until it became to a point you guys had to see that I'm being hurt. So I sat them down and I told them that we're moving. And for that alone, my kids were so happy. Actually, they were so happy, because they openly told me that they were afraid. They were normally afraid, but they couldn't tell me. Even when my son used to go to school, he never wanted to come back home. He used to be the last to board the bus. They go looking for him in school because he doesn't want to come back home. So when it comes to your children, you need to be honest. And I always speak the truth when it comes to my kids. And I told them, yes, I made a mistake. I tried to persevere for you guys, but at the same time, we have to move out and we have to be strong. And the fact that Dad will no longer be with us here, we need to work as a front so that we can heal each other together. The thing I don't do, I don't talk ill about the man to my kids, because at the end of the day, it was my fight with him, not the kids. And when it comes to men, relating with men, because I'm also in that field, in terms of property, I get to meet so many men out there. So it is a healing process, and not every man is one who hurt you. The man who hurt you, the specific man who hurt you, you do not go beating people, every single man you meet out there, because ati ulipigwa na mmoja so utachukia wanaume. Not all men are the same.
Our next question is coming from Frida.
Thank you. My name is Frida Okachi, a journalist. My question goes to Mheshimiwa. I'm happy that some of the facility have Tumaini clinics, but how do these clinic works? Because most of health facilities, you get at 3 p.m. you have closed. That is during the day. And these gender-based violence occurs at night. How does those clinics operate?
There are 23 Tumaini clinics, and I'll give you an example. We have specific health workers that we have trained for the last 5 months to deal with GBV cases only. So you will not have to go and be attended to in a general ward. That is where you start. And those own community officers, we have also trained them on those cases so that when you appear, they will be able to know that you have appeared. And the other one is about the integrated system, that you don't necessarily have to go to any Tumaini clinic. You can go to any other public hospital in Nairobi, and within that public hospital, we have a certain program that's dealing specifically with GBV. So I think both private and Tumaini clinics are well catered for to deal with questions and cases of GBV.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think that was adequately represented. Final question from Wendy.
Thank you so much. My name is Wendy Aura, and I work with Young Women Leaders Connect. My concern is about online violence, which I think right now, especially the run-up to the general election, is rampant. Yet it is the most unreported, but the consequences of it are as much harsh as the physical violence, especially on women in politics. I say this because I'm imagining young women who are in the political field, what they're going through in terms of online bullying, and most of them have been forced to maybe deactivate accounts or maybe just go through a lot in person because of this, for example, the common Slay Queen hashtag that is being imposed on beautiful young women in politics. And I wanted to know from Mheshimiwa, being as beautiful as you are, maybe how would you advise young women in politics to handle online violence cases, and also what are the reporting mechanisms that are effective? Because I think most of them, they go unreported, and I think this is another silent form of violence that we are not talking about much. So how can we handle that? And maybe from a legal perspective, our lawyer can tell us what is being done to ensure that it's being handled effectively. Thank you.
Thank you. If you have been following me, there's a law that I've passed in Parliament that's on violent extremism. The violent extremism law, it's also catering for people who are violating others' rights even online. And if you look at that law keenly, it's also talking about if you dare do a meeting online, a virtual meeting. And I think currently it's the only law that mentions virtual meetings. If you hold a virtual meeting and there's violence, it doesn't have to be physical. Somebody can even write about something that you don't like. That person, if convicted in a court of law, will be liable to a term not exceeding 30 years.
I'd like to invite Jerry to give us a parting shot before we call it a day.
What I'm going to say is to every person that is seated here, that we have a voice and that we have something that we can say and address. We all know people who've gone through issues of domestic violence, and what are you doing about it as an individual? How are you educating your friends? What are you talking about? It is silence that makes these things fester and keep being there in the community. So it is your obligation to also ensure that when somebody talks to you or you see something like that, that you also encourage them to report, you encourage them to talk about it, and be there for people that you know are going through this. It's together, you and I. You and I are the only people who are going to make sure that this cycle ends. Thank you very much.
Profound words. There's nothing else I can add from there. But so we have come to the end of today's very interactive, very engaging, and very insightful episode. Remember to keep the conversation going on all our social media platforms at Dadas Kenya. We would really like to hear from you. What are your thoughts about the first episode? We would want to hear your questions, your feedback, because as I said, we are dealing with a very interactive episode where we would want to hear from everybody involved. Before I leave, I would like to pose this question to you. Being an election year, what is your MCA? What is your woman's rep? What is your governor? What is even your presidential candidate saying about domestic violence in their campaign trails? What is included in their manifesto that represents and addresses women's issues? Let's be the change that we want to see. So on behalf of my panel, my lovely audience, KBC, our sponsor, Journalists for Human Rights, JHR, our lovely sponsor, the Boma Hotel, who have offered us with this fantastic facility, and myself, Ashiko Mbune, I wish you all a lovely week, and I'll see you again next week, same time, same place, only on Dadas. As we leave, let's take a look at our distinguished Dadas profile, CJ Kome.